us today.
Yeah, she's literally a legend.
Yeah. All right. Well, good morning, everyone.
Flapping on the screen. Do you want to talk to her?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, wait a minute. I can hear him suddenly.
Got it. Okay. Don't touch anything. We're good.
Perfect. One of the fun things I think about a live virtual event is you're always working through tech and things
our
like
end is very
Peter,
poor.
go away. I can't hear.
that.
Wait a minute. I can see you, and if I could lip read, we could communicate.
Yes.
Okay, Myrtle.
That's
We
okay.
just have to go with it.
A little bit. Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So
Great.
good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for opening day of the Woods Hole.
Right, but I'm trying to hear the guy.
My name. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. My name is Sean Volk, and I am an associate.
I can just hear you if nobody else is talking. Sean, that's how we pronounce it. Is that what you say?
It is. Yes, that's how I spell my name. It's S-E-A-N. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Right.
So Myrtle, I'll have some questions for you in just a little bit. All right.
You ask the questions, and I won't look at the. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on opening day. I'm calling in today from Fargo, North Dakota to moderate our first of 2 virtual filmmaker chats. Today, I'm joined by some very special guests.
Wait a sec, Sean. Sean.
Yes.
What could I possibly press that would make you more louder?
If you have a volume button on your device, Myrtle, that could maybe.
Do I have a what?
A volume button?
Yes, it's on full.
Oh, I'm not. I apologize, Myrtle. I'm not quite sure though.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on.
Yeah. So as I was saying, today I'm joined by 7 very special guests representing short films in the festival. I'm grateful that Woods Hole has given us this opportunity to have our conversation. And this morning we're going to discuss their films and celebrate the stories they've told. After our chat, please make sure to visit woodsholefilmfestival.org to purchase tickets and passes and to learn more about the films and special virtual events programmed throughout the week. So let's get our conversation started with a round of introductions. So I'm going to call on each of you individually. And could you tell us your name, where you're from, what film you're
my
with,
audio,
and then what your role was on the film? All right, so let's start with Orestia. Did I say your name right, Orestia? I'm so sorry.
Hi,
I just cannot hear a word.
Now
there's a pretty girl, and I can't hear a word you're saying.
Well,
Okay.
Thanks for calling me pretty, Myrtle. I'm all about that. It's
Yes.
6 a.m. here, so thank you.
Now, funnily enough, Leanne's voice comes over louder.
I am the filmmaker for the doc short Name Crew Tiny.
Robin says, don't say anything, Myrtle.
Yeah. So you're our director for which film, Orestia?
For the doc short Name Crew Tiny Toons.
All right. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Leanne. Hello. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
And then which film are you here with today, Leanne?
Today we have Myrtle Simpson, A Life on Ice, and we have with us Robin Simpson, Myrtle's oldest son, and also Myrtle herself calling in from Scotland.
All right. Excellent. Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Myrtle. We'll talk to both of you a little bit later. Perfect. All right. Good morning, Nick. Hello.
Hello, my name is Nick. I am the director of photography and editor for High Card.
All right. Hi, Jay. Welcome this morning.
Thank you. My name is Jay Hyman. I'm one of the producers with Name Crew Tiny Toons.
Excellent. All right. Good morning, Nelson. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Hi, my name is Nelson Kim, and I wrote and directed the short film called Therapy.
Awesome. Thank you, Nelson. All right. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Hi. Hi. So I acted in Nelson's film, and I'm here with Kai, who was the director of photography.
Yes. I thought that you looked very familiar, Kate. Hello.
Yes.
All right. Hi, Connor. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Connor Kiesling. I'm the writer-director of the short film High Card.
All right. Excellent. And then Andrew and Kira, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, good
How
morning.
you doing? Nice to see you, Sean.
Nice to see you.
My name's Andrew Montague. I'm the writer-director of My Other Suit is Human. And I'm Kira Fitzpatrick. I'm the producer of Mother Still Human.
All right, excellent. And then Eric, good morning.
Good morning. This is so funny. Good to meet everybody. My name is Eric. I was the editor for Name Crew Tiny Toons.
All right, excellent. And then Brian, hello.
Good morning. I'm Brian. I'm one of the directors, producer, and editor of Play Along, the comedy horror short.
Excellent.
Temporary unmuted.
And then Zita, how are you?
Unmuted, you should be okay.
You see, we're not connected.
Hello. I'm not sure if people can hear me because it seems to be on and off. Yeah, cool. Okay. Sorry, I'm on the phone. It's a bit weird. I'm the cinematographer for My Other Suit is Human. Hi, everyone.
All right. Hello. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. This is very exciting. So you'll be able to see today throughout our conversation, the films that we have are both narrative and documentary shorts. And they were grouped together for this conversation by our senior programming team because they each ask in a bold and unique way, what do I do now? Whether it's in choosing life in the face of grief or planning a new history-making adventure, each of these films presents stories of people at a crossroads, having to make critical choices, and the films then explored the life-changing implications. So I was wondering, for each of the filmmakers, I'll call on you each by project. If you could describe a little bit about the origin of your project, how did you get started? How did you find the story? And how did you decide it was a story that you wanted to tell? So could we first hear a little bit from, we didn't have anyone from Balloon this morning, did we? I don't think so. Any Balloon filmmakers, raise your hand or forever hold your peace. All right, excellent. Well, if they pop on, we'll say hi to them too and invite them in. All right, how about Play Along, Brian?
Hi. Yeah, the question was, how did we come by this story?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Play Along, the story of Play Along is, if you guys have seen the movie, I don't know, but it's a very nutty story about puppets being held hostage, and I don't know how to talk too much about it without being very spoilery. And so all I'll say is that Play Along was a story that came up out of the ashes of a web series that we were in the process of making, and our lead actor backed out after we'd finished shooting 2 episodes and before we could finish the rest. And so it's like, it was this partial thing that couldn't go anywhere. And we sat in a room one night, the creative team, and we're like, what can we do with the scraps from that project that we have left? Meaning the shoot dates, the cast, whatever. And so we were like, let's figure this out, and like kind of used just said like, what's everyone's favorite element? And the 5 of us that were in the room like threw things out there, like, you know, magical realism, puppets, horror, and eventually came to this story through the use of pieces from a different project altogether that still existed at the time that it fell through, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. That's really cool. I have a couple more questions that I'll ask you in a little bit more depth a little bit later, but thank you very much for kicking our conversation off, Brian. All right, Leanne, could you tell us a little bit about how you came to tell Myrtle's story on film?
Absolutely. So I was working on another project, and Myrtle's second son, Bruce, who's not with us today, was one of the interview subjects for the piece I was working on. And it just so happened to be set in a ski setting. He was taking a team skiing, and Bruce is they're all really good skiers. Bruce is a very, very good skier. And so somebody off camera kind of asked him, wow, like, how did you get to be such a good skier? And he said, well, I come by it honestly, both my parents are polar explorers. And I was editing the piece and I almost fell off my chair. Because you don't hear, I mean, to my knowledge, I mean, I'm certainly not a polar historian, but there's only one couple that are polar explorers, and that happens to be Ray Fine's parents, Lord and Lady Fine. Yeah, so I found the story that way. I was immediately intrigued and started asking a million questions. And I Googled Myrtle, and up she popped. She had recently been awarded the Polar Medal from Queen Elizabeth, and and she was just wasn't the story just wasn't very widely known, and I thought that was so strange. That I couldn't look in a history book and find her name, because clearly, for those of you that don't know, she was the first woman who crossed Greenland on foot. So you just you really couldn't find that accomplishment in record books. So I set about to make a film about it.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Leanne. We'll talk a little bit more in just a little while. Thank you. All right. So the crew from Name Crew Tiny Toons. Hello. Could one of you talk a little bit about how did you get connected?
No, can't hear a thing.
Oh, Myrtle, we'll call on you in a little bit. All right.
Okie doke.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Right.
So with the Name Crew film,
Set me off, Robin.
How did you find this kind of dance company, and how did you meet KK initially?
Yeah, I was traveling full-time, kind of anchored to nowhere, and found myself living in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where the film mostly takes place, and had gone to an event where the kids were performing, and met KK, and we started talking, and I said, you know, your English is really good. And he said, oh yeah, thanks. I grew up in Long Beach. I said, oh, no kidding. So how did you end up in Cambodia? Because he's clearly Khmer. I said, how did you end up back in Cambodia? And he told me his story, and I was just completely blown away about being a refugee and getting involved in gang violence and getting deported back to a country he'd never even been to. And it was just an incredible story that really struck me. And I think probably most filmmakers can agree, like it wouldn't leave me alone. I just kind of had to make it. And I'm very fortunate that I live in Los Angeles now, but I lived in Boston for many years, and Eric is very involved in the documentary film scene there. And I asked him to edit, and told him the story, and he was like, yeah, this is a great story, we have to do it. And same with Jay. Jay and I worked together professionally on he directed a series that I produced, and I said, hey, what do you think about this? He said, yeah, great, I'm in, let's go. So I'm really fortunate that I had a great group of people that were willing to help me tell this story that I felt really needed to be told.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So let's talk to our representatives from Therapy, which is one of our narrative shorts and also the shortest of the films in this kind of discussion that we're having. Hi, everyone. How did you decide that you wanted to make a film that kind of dove into therapy like this?
Nelson.
Okay, hi.
Nelson? Oh.
Hey, so Therapy is a very, very short film, just a little over 2 minutes long. And in it, Kate plays a woman who is venting to her therapist after an argument with her boyfriend, and sort of giving her side of the story. And you never actually see or hear from the therapist. So it's Kate giving a monologue the entire time to an unseen, possibly even non-existent therapist. So I think what attracted me to this idea was wanting to make a film. It's not so much about therapy per se. I've actually never been in therapy. Friends tell me it's a marvelous, life-changing experience. But I wanted to make a film that somehow captured the way in which we sort of tell stories about our own lives, and the way in which we kind of create narratives in our heads to make sense of what we're going through. You know, as every filmmaker knows, you know, for narrative film, it's all about trying to find a way to sort of externalize what's going on inside the characters. So I thought this was a really kind of powerful metaphor to show somebody and their thought process and how they make sense of their own lives and what's happening to them.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And then how about from My Other Suit is Human team? Could you guys speak a little bit? How did you come up with this idea to look at grief the way that you did? Grief and love.
Yeah, so like originally, like my parents, they lost a child when when I was a teenager, and the kid was quite young, but only like a couple of weeks, months old. And I was kind of looking in on their dynamic as they were kind of like struggling to kind of connect themselves, deal with kids who are older, as well as losing a young baby themselves. So it's kind of like this weird dynamic I was looking in on. And that's how I wanted to approach this film as well, was kind of like we're looking at this person who is like obviously overcome with grief and not sure how to kind of move on with their lives. And it was just so interesting for me, and like it never left me ever since I was a teenager. It's always been around and an idea in my head, and I was just lucky enough to kind of like get those thoughts down into a script that I showed to people, and they were like, yes, this is really good, we should do this. And you know, like Kira and Zeta, like they really liked the script, and I was lucky enough to get them on board, and they were so enthusiastic about it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. Excellent. And then let's hear from the crew with High Card. Could you both or talk a little bit about where did the idea of your narrative come from with the story of two people deciding whether or not they're going to have sex, and one of whom is a virgin?
The idea came from, this was my senior thesis project, undergraduate, when I went to school, and I knew that I needed to do something that didn't cost a lot of money. So I love dialogue driven films. So I kind of had the idea of, you know, having something take place in one room. Maybe it feels like a scene from something bigger because I'm not good at keeping things short and concise. And I guess the idea came from something I had a few years ago before I went to college, where the idea was you have two best friends and they're both virgins, and they have to decide if they want to go to college having had sex. But then I decided to take that idea and try to put it with young 20-something college kids and basically stick them in a room. I was a huge fan of the Neon Demon. I had seen it within the last year, so I kind of wanted to put that aesthetic in, the blue and purple neon if I could. And that's how it started, I guess. And then just kind of let the characters take me wherever they decide they wanted to go.
Well, could you talk a little bit about, I'm really interested because the whole film does take place in that one setting, in that one bedroom. What was that like as a filmmaker, kind of having to tell the whole world of the story in one kind of very confined space?
Yeah, we used our black box theater at our school, and luckily it's like a much larger room than a typical bedroom. We had considered using one of our friends' bedrooms, but just moving the camera around, and that wouldn't have been very possible. Everything would have been super cramped. And my last film that I did, I wasn't really happy with like the blocking and the staging, so we tried to set up like different areas around the room that the one more nervous character could kind of bounce from, I guess, spot to sit to chair to beanbag, just around the room as he slowly makes his way to her while she's sitting on the bed. So that was kind of really fun to try to figure out, you know, when is he going to move? And I like how we were able to use the whole room too, because our production designer did a fantastic job, and being able to show everything that she did, I was really happy to do that because she did an incredible job.
Yeah.
She made all those neon signs too.
Really?
She made all those, yeah.
Okay. It's cool because I think it has such immediately, it has such a distinctive feel and look that just translates throughout. So I think that, you know, even though you are working with such a small space, it feels so intentional. So that it's cool that you were able to kind of convey that using, you know, like the black box theater. So I also wanted to know, how did you go about working with the actors to kind of develop the sense of rapport that they had? Because it seemed, you know, obviously there's tension and anxiety in this very loaded conversation about will they or won't they. But they had a really like easy, relaxed chemistry. How do you go about fostering that dynamic on set?
With the script, I had actually wrote the script with the intention of casting Mickey, who plays one of the leads in the film, because one of my friends was just telling me that, you know, like I had known that she was a great actress, and he was talking about how she was auditioning for a lot of short films at her school and just wasn't getting any roles. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to write this one for her. She's fantastic. I'd love to work with her because I'd never worked with her before. So luckily for her, like we just had to match the dialogue a little bit more with her as a person. And Sean, who played the other lead, we had worked with him, I guess, a couple of times. And so we had already had a working relationship before. And with the two of them, they had acted in a lot of plays together at school. So they were familiar with each other, which worked really well, where they didn't have to get to know each other to build that type of relationship that was really comfortable. And they both have they're both very capable of just meshing with whoever they're working with. Okay. So luckily that part was really easy for us. And with them, it was just trying to get the feel of the film and just the atmosphere that we're trying to create, like with Nick, with camera and with the production design, just putting them in that space, I think helped much more with the production design as well. Like you mentioned, you get this immediate feel. And I think that for them, you kind of feel it when you're in that room as well. And, you talk a little bit quieter and you're a little bit more relaxed. And yeah, it worked really well with them.
Mm-hmm. No, and I really want to commend you too, because I think the film has such a striking intimacy too, because it's such a personal conversation. It has such high stakes. But then it never feels caricatured. You really feel like you get to know them in a meaningful way. So just kudos. It's an excellent film.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that we're screening it and that you were able to join us for this conversation today. So thank you very much. So I wanted to talk with another film that also features two actors that are kind of allowed to go and do their thing so beautifully. Let's speak with the crew from My Other Suit Is Human. Could you talk a little bit about what was it like kind of creating this world in which you have, just two actors performing and telling this intense story about the loss of a child, about dealing with grief, and kind of this very kind of heightened world in which, the mother decides that she's going to wear a robot costume that she's made out of cardboard herself.
Yeah. I'll go.
Yeah, you speak.
So when Andrew brought me the script, I just loved it. I thought it was really beautiful, and we've worked together in the past, and it's kind of what we do. It's very universal themes told in a very unusual way, and obviously building a robot suit is a very specific physical way of dealing with something, but it's more of, I suppose, a metaphor for, originally when I read it as being like a stage of grief, and her basically needing the suit as part of like processing through her stages of grief. So I kind of loved it visually. With regard to the actors, obviously Bethany Blake, who played Zoe, and Simeon Oakes, who played Stephen, they're both just phenomenal. They came into it at different times. We held auditions obviously for both roles. Simeon was actually the first person that we saw. Yeah. He came into our first audition, and we had a lot of actors to see, and he came in, he was the first person we saw, and he just knocked our socks off, and he just stuck with us the entire time. And then when it came to callbacks, Simeon came in. We had some really, really great actors up for the role. Simeon came in, and Andrew likes to do a thing where he'll have sent them the scene beforehand and then won't necessarily direct them immediately come in. He'll just want to like see how they've interpreted it. And he was there. He knew exactly what the beats were. He knew exactly what the tone of voice was. He had it perfectly. So he was just perfect. And then Beth separately, she came in, obviously she auditioned as well, but she actually sent us a self-tape, funnily enough. That was how we first met Beth, through a self-tape. And she was just, again, incredible. And then we met her in person, loved her, really wanted her. And then the second we got the two of them in a room together and start rehearsing, they were just magic. They were so perfect. And they have, as you've seen, they have that really great chemistry. They have, it was part of how you directed it. You kind of kept them separate as much as possible.
Yeah, even like on the first day of shooting, it was just Beth by herself. We didn't want Stephen even on set. It was just to have her and kind of have this sense of isolation that, she's there and can't not really rely on anybody else. So she needs to kind of like do something herself to change the kind of rut that she's in and start to move on. And then like the cinematography, like with Zeta, to kind of just amplify that, kind of like shooting through doors and kind of having that distance. It just amplified it so much.
Yeah, Zeta and Andrew worked together really closely, and just like everything that Andrew saw in his head, Zeta managed to capture, because she's phenomenal. So yeah, we love that.
Well, I was going to ask you, Zeta, could you talk a little bit about how you approach the cinematography? Because I think the film is so beautifully brought to life. It has such a rich tone, and it feels so warm. Could you talk a little bit about how did you achieve that look, and why that kind of feel when it is such tough subject matter?
Yes, so first of all, the script in itself was really strong, and that helped a lot. And Andrew had very specific visuals, which also helped a lot, like super specific. It was like 5 minutes before midday or 11 minutes after or something like that. But we came to an agreement that the isolation would be through the framing and through the pacing, and as he mentioned, through doors or scenes where the camera is completely locked or it ever so slightly moves and it's all very. On the other hand, we wanted the colors to be rich. There was even some idea of it being like American style in terms of the geography. The same way she uses a robot suit, which is cute and funny, to deal with something so serious and so melancholic, like grief. The same way we wanted with the cinematography to have this kind of combination. So yeah, I would say, and color was super important in it. Like her hair is this like bright red, the same way the world has these colors. Like, yeah, I think that's kind of summarizes how I approached it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's such a beautiful film. Just very quickly, could you talk a little bit about the design of the suit? How long did it take to kind of get the version that you wound up using in the film? Because it's such a cool piece. The first time I went, oh my gosh.
It was great because I originally came up with this kind of idea of like how the suit would, and I had a little doll of evil Spock from Star Trek. And it's like I used him as a kind of mannequin to kind of like just build stuff around. And Kira actually managed to find this guy, Chris Fitzpatrick, who works on a load of like Netflix films and
Chris is like 20 years in the industry. He worked on Aeon Flux, he worked on loads of stuff, and
his workshop's just like 20 minutes up the road in London. And we actually have the head.
One of the heads with her ears, as you can see. I don't think you can see them right there.
But I was very specific on kind of like, I needed her to move as if, she has like the full motions, like even when she's hanging up the washing, and she can do day-to-day things and kind of just evolve. So that's like her suit just evolves over time and gets a little bit more used to it until she doesn't need it anymore. But the face, it was to have emotion in the face. And it was always hard. Like, it's a cardboard face. How are you going to portray emotion? And one of the things I learned in film school was that it's always in the eyes, and like everything that you're always looking at, the eyes have to be the main thing. So I went with a very sympathetic eye looks, and then whichever way her head was leaning up down, it just changed the face. I know it's weird to say, but it changed how her face looked. Just kind of up, it's more like happy, and then if it goes down, it's so sad and heartbreaking. And it's just, worked on it that way.
We do have to say as well, Chris, phenomenal. Chris took a full body mold of our actress, so I'm talking like bottom of the toes to top of the head, full body mold, including her face. He even molded her face to make sure that where like the mapping of her nose and stuff is, that it could sit comfortably. And he was just, as soon as we got him on board, we were just over the moon because he's phenomenal.
He said it was like the most amazing, non-fantastic suit he's ever made.
Yeah, the most amazing, boring thing ever.
Yeah, just cardboard. But yeah, it was great. It was really great working. Like the suit just kind of made it. It was whatever was in my head, just made it into reality, which was great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. Thank you so much. And the film is screening as one of our narrative shorts. So please make sure, if you haven't seen it yet, please check it out in one of our shorts blocks. It's really well made. So we've been talking with shorts that had very small casts, but there is one short in our group that actually just has one lone person in it. So let's talk with the team from Therapy, please. Could you tell us a little bit about how did you decide to just have the one performer in the screen, and how did that impact how you shot and directed it?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned before, the film is about a woman speaking to her therapist, and from the very beginning, the idea was that you would never see or hear the therapist; you would just hear the woman's version of reality and how she interprets it. So it's a monologue, even though in real life the situation would be more of a dialogue. We decided just to go with the idea that it's a woman speaking sort of almost into this void. And Kate and Kai have worked together many times before. We're old friends from way back, and we collaborated together before. So it was a very easy choice to work with the two of them, who are partners in filmmaking as well as in life. They've actually just directed their own first feature, which has been making the rounds of the international festival circuit. So it was a very easy choice. All I needed it was also the first thing I had made in a couple of years since I directed my first feature, so my first and only feature at this point. So I was really itching to get back into things and make something as soon as possible. And so I wrote this thing, and I knew that all I needed to make it happen was a cinematographer and an actor. And luckily, I knew this fantastically talented pair who were good friends of mine who were available. So we did the whole thing in one afternoon in their apartment. Do you guys want to mention anything about the process, or?
I would just say, yeah, I think, there are people who go to therapy hoping to yield great change. And then there are people who go looking for affirmation. And I think that for this character, it was like immaterial or someone else was in the room. Like she was not receptive to any outside influence. So to me, it makes sense that you never see the therapist. I think that their presence was neither here nor there. So I would say that. And do you want to talk at all about the shooting?
Yeah, I think like shooting one person talking is actually very fun. Like I think like Nelson and I we experiment with like angles, but I think in the end like he picked a very good choice, like one angle, but then just editing to to show the dynamic is almost a conversation, which I think is the best choice. But then it was very fun. Like, we have one shot, and then because of we are in the space where we can really just talk about how does it work with the text, or how does it work with the story, and not be distracted by other thing for this one, which I think is very good.
And then Kate, could you talk just a little bit about what was it like kind of carrying the film, just visually, it's you, what was that like for you as a performer, knowing that it was just you? And also I do want to say I loved the performance is so great, because midway through I just started going, is there even anyone there? It really
yeah.
didn't seem to matter if you were actually
I don't think so.
And that's such a credit to your work.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know one person who would always come home from therapy and be like, my therapist said I was right about everything. So I've known people who sort of emerged from therapy having affirmed their own beliefs, and so I guess I had a good model to base performance on. I was lucky in that Nelson and Kai, they just indulged many takes. So I guess I had the chance to be pretty unself-conscious about how I might appear. I wasn't really thinking about being on camera because they exhausted every possible angle. We probably did dozens of takes. Is that true? There were many times that we tried to just do the entire thing with the intention of doing it in one take. That was something that we tossed around as a possibility. So we tried to do the whole thing in one go to have that option. So, but by the end, I was very unself-conscious. Yeah.
And we did a lot of takes because, of course, I wasn't as I thought I had a plan in mind, but then I ended up, being not as decisive as I'd hoped. So, which is why I had Kai shoot it from so many different angles. And it wasn't until I got into the editing room that I realized the sort of solution that was there in front of me the whole time, which is that I decided to edit it so it feels as if Kate is having a conversation with herself. So it's a monologue, but it's edited as if it's a sort of reverse shot dialogue scene. Yeah. I considering how simple the film is in its conception, I was sort of stuck in the editing room until I came up with that one very simple idea that sort of solved the whole thing for me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to the team with Therapy. It's such a wonderful short, and thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
So let's shift gears now and talk with Brian from Play Along. So Brian, for those that haven't seen it, as you mentioned, Play Along is this kind of dark comedy, horror shorts, almost musical at times, puppet extravaganza about someone about a hostage situation involving puppets. There's so much going on, and yet you fuse it and kind of blend it all together, I think, so artfully. Can you talk a little bit about how did you merge kind of all of these very disparate styles and themes to work so well together?
Honestly, I think part of that was like a gift from the universe. I tried to describe earlier the project that we were working on prior that kind of fell apart, and like that project could not have been more different than this one. That was like a heartwarming family drama, like in the style of This Is Us or something. Like, and this is like, you know, Scream meets Death on steroids. So like they're completely different. And like, I think part of what made it work for us was that I was the showrunner of that previous project, and the three of the co-writers and the co-director on Play Along were all writers in my writer's room. And when that project fell apart, we decided, like, we want to make something out of the scraps. And I think because we were determined to make a project come about, like there was no giving up on it. And like the actors in the movie are the actors from the web series minus the one guy, and like some of the themes are similar too, in terms of like the family drama that takes place at you know, during the later stages. But we put our heads together and figured out what everyone's disparate interests were, and then kind of like forced a think tank on ourselves where we said, how do we make mystery, horror, family drama, and puppets and magical realism all work? Let's just force ourselves to make it work. And like I call it writing out from out of box. You know what I mean? Like you're in a box and you have to write out of the box. So it's like these were the parameters that we came up with when we had our brainstorming, and we said, all right, now let's put it together and like make a story that has these. And we just sat there. We did it till like 2 a.m, like kind of figuring out what the themes would be, and like kind of like blue skied it. Blue sky is like a term we use for brainstorming. So we were like blue skying the thing, which means like no idea is a no. And so we ended up having all kinds of ideas up on the blue sky board because nothing is a no. And then you see these like things up there that don't seem at first like they would make good connections, like puppets and a hostage situation, for example. But in the end, you hear it out loud and you're like, that's weird. But at the same time, there's like something intriguing and appealing about the crazy uniqueness of that kind of mashup. And so we had all of our separate sort of longings as filmmakers on the board and said, like, we're going to make it work with this cast on these dates, which was like 7 weeks away. And it turned into this beautiful thing that I love so much.
Excellent. And, you know, it is really a puppet extravaganza. Could you tell us just quickly, how did you come about having the puppets? Did you have them made, or did you find them?
We found them. Yeah, we found them online. We just did our due diligence to make sure they weren't like copywritten logo puppet images of some kind, like from some show that we'd never heard of. But other than that, we just kind of found these puppets. Yeah. It was a late night Amazon binge.
Oh my gosh. It's awesome. It's so beautiful. And I think it's so funny and bizarre. And then there are a couple of moments that just hit you in such a like, oh my God, like they're so legitimately shocking. And there are some reveals that I don't want to talk about at all, but you must watch Play Along. And it's screening right now as part of the festival. So perfect. So thank you to our narrative short filmmakers. Let's switch gears a little bit to our documentarians that we have. So Orestia, could you talk a little bit about how did you initially learn about the program that KK had built for Name Crew Tiny Toons?
Yeah, when I was living in Phnom Penh, I went to a networking event and the kids were performing there. And I was like, wow, these are really good hip hop dancers. He's like, I mean, the youngest dancer there was 4 and he was, you know, doing flips and stuff. It was so cute. And I just was really inspired by the story. I had heard, you know, they had in the programming that it was a school for at-risk and poor youth. And basically they were able to get an education through this hip hop and breakdancing program. So I was just really inspired. And I, after that evening, went to the school just to, I don't know, follow some sort of gut and ended up talking to KK and Short, who are the founder and the managing director. And I just was really curious about their story. And luckily, actually, the power was out the day that I visited the school. So we had all this time to talk because there was no way to play the music. And that's kind of how we really fell into conversation. And I learned more about their stories and was just really inspired by them.
Perfect. Well, could you talk a little bit about what was it like working with the kids in the school and getting to know their families and the teachers? Because the film, I think, has such a warm, beautiful energy, and it looks at, you know, these kids, I think, with such love and just true affection for their possibility, their potential, and what they're going to bring to the world. And it left me feeling just so warm and excited. So could you talk a little bit about what it was like working with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, Jay, I'd love for you to jump in so you can have a chance to talk. Maybe you can share.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. You know, I was so lucky to get involved with this with Aristia and Eric and others as well, and I had the great opportunity to go to Cambodia with Aristia to do all the filming. So, you know, I think immediately we were really welcomed, and I think kids there, you know, they sort of have a natural curiosity about visitors coming in or whatnot. And then we come in we had a great Cambodian crew working with us, which I think was fantastic. So here we come in like two Westerners and then this Cambodian crew. And, you know, there's some like, hey, what are they doing here? But, you know, we sort of going back and back and back, I think certainly, you know, I think Aristia, I know I did sort of, you know, develop bonds with certain kids that you just sort of end up attaching to a little bit, that, you know, that you see every day.
They had a little best friend by the end of it that was following.
Yeah, it's a great kid.
And even though I'm the director, he's the man, so everyone thinks he's in charge. And Jay's so great. He's like, actually, she's in charge.
But no, it was nice. And I think for both of us, like to speak to that, like it was hard to leave. It was like, oh, like this is sort of what we do. And like tomorrow we're not going to be here. And I think that's within Aristia's personality and mine as well, is that we just kind of throw ourselves in and get attached. And if I can quickly say, and then I'll stop, but, you know, one of the things that really motivated me to be part of this, besides the fact that I had worked with Aristia before and we got along and our friends and colleagues, is, you know, I think anyone with sort of a creative storytelling mind, you come across these moments in whatever travels or day-to-day activities that you're doing, where you see little stories, and in your creative filmmaking head, you're like, wow, even that 2-minute clip or this story or that person would be an amazing film. And I think so often those things, they could still make great stories, but they're not always acted on. And to sort of hear how Aristia came to this story, and that now she was acting on it, and she's like, I am doing this, I am going, this is happening, I have to do this. That meant a lot to me, you know, like, all right, then I want to be part of this and help where I can. So I think that's important to know about the process of how the film came to be.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. It's such a beautiful film, and I loved how it melded, you know, this beautiful art of street dancing with telling their stories, but then also this really kind of eye-opening, thoughtful look at what it means at you know, at ICE agents and kind of what's happened with deportations as well, and what happens to people after they've been deported. I think that you handled all of that so thoughtfully. So please make sure Name Crew Tiny Toons is now playing as part of the Woods Hole Film Festival since it's officially opening day. So thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us. All right, and Leanne and Myrtle, let's talk a little bit about Myrtle Simpson, A Life on Ice. Myrtle, if you don't mind kicking us off, could you tell us what was it like having your story told in a half-an-hour documentary?
I think she's still on mute.
Oh, Myrtle, you're muted. Could you have someone click mute for you?
They were controlling for her.
What you say?
There we go.
There you go.
Perfect. Did you hear the question, Myrtle?
Yes. What was it like opening the book, as it were? I just imagined that nobody was really very interested. So it was a daft idea to try to make a film out of it. and it would just fall below, below the waterline. So I was very surprised when I realized that people, in fact, were interested. And I think it's because most people, well, I think it's native to us all to want to see what's the other side of the hill. And here's an example that I'd gone to look, and most people perhaps don't get that chance or don't bother to go. I was just really talking about, well, I still had that curiosity, I suppose, of wanting to, well, to keep up that feeling that I think we all have, it every child has, about the great outdoors. You want to climb the hill and get to the other side, and now our whole way of life is to stop people doing that. I saw two little kids practicing on the ski slope, plastic ski slope, and there was a whole lot of them having terrific fun, 4 and 5-year-olds, and suddenly it was all halted because a mother came running on saying, "Careful, careful," and all these kids suddenly stopped, having the time of their lives. There's too much of that in the world today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Myrtle. And Myrtle, could you tell us, what was it like, on that journey across Greenland, going across the ice on foot and then extending that and then journeying to the North Pole? What was it like seeing such a loving film made about your adventures that you've been on?
Well, of course, it was absolutely magic. I've always been interested in polar explorers and polar regions and that sort of thing. So it was just a fantastic chance to feel it for myself. And there's just nothing as beautiful as the North Polar pack ice that we crossed to get onto the island, and then we were walking, well, over a horizon that was just endless in whichever direction you looked at. I remember on our North Pole saying to Roger, who was one of us, contribution was to, he was the person that knew the way north was. And I remember saying, "Which way are we going, Rog?" And he said, "Well, where do you think?" It's only one direction, and that's north. Yeah. No, it was a terrific privilege. And I'm sorry now that perhaps very few people will have a chance to walk on the polar ice as I did, because it's going so fast.
Yeah. Well, and Leanne, I wanted to ask you, in telling Myrtle's story, you do start to touch upon some of those realities of climate change, of the shifting and disappearing ice. Could you talk a little bit about how you approached, telling this miraculous life while also identifying kind of some of those difficult realities that we're now facing globally?
Yeah, so the idea that we had from the beginning is to turn the film into a feature version. So this is kind of the phase one. The next phase will be Myrtle's story, but we'll be bringing in more of the climate change story and also more about gender within outdoor sports and gender equity, and it's an area that's been dominated by men historically, but there are women polar explorers. There's plenty of women polar explorers, and Myrtle in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was one of the few women who was operating in the space. Yeah, and the Simpsons were really unique in that they were some of the first witnesses to what we now recognize as the beginnings of climate change. So in the film, I don't want to spoil it for everyone, but in the film, they at some point get trapped on the sea ice coming back from the North Pole. And at the time of year that they were coming back, the ice should not have been open. They should have been able to walk across the ice back onto the land of Ellesmere Island. And due to climate change, the ice had melted early, and they were for a period of time stuck there. Until the conditions changed, and they were, it was very dangerous, and they very easily could have died. They were on ice that was actually moving out to sea rather than drifting toward the land. So just the time of the era that they were active in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s is really some of the some of the early indications I think that we had in the scientific community that the ice in the Arctic is melting. It's disappearing.
Please, yeah.
I'm just going to say it's very interesting though now. Suddenly it's all very, very exciting if you're going north, that bits of land that haven't been known for generations are now becoming visible, and it might it might have all sorts of things like more petrol and so on. But what's really exciting is that people seem to have lived there when there was no ice. So the whole of, the whole of our whole world has come and gone in the way of tides and ice and things, and that is absolutely fascinating. So I wish I were in the next generation that could now go and see what was underneath the ground that we were walking on, wherever it is in the world. It's just fascinating. And isn't it great there's still people who want to find out?
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
nothing unique about me, incidentally. I think I've just done what I wanted to do, and many people don't do that in their life. They think, oh my goodness, I've got to conform to everybody else.
Oh my
So can I just want to point out that Robin has joined us today. Robin is the little boy that's waiting on the runway when they complete their North Pole journey, and he's the one Myrtle can recognize. And Robin is here with us today. So thanks for joining us, Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
It's a pleasure. As I alluded to at the beginning, my mother was 90 2 Sundays ago, and we went for a swim in the River Spey, which is a fairly cold river in Scotland. And Mum's saying that she's entirely normal is not quite true. It's very difficult to keep up with her. But thanks for having me. And one of the success stories I think about Leanne's film is that she's become part of the family. So if you want to make a film about a family, I think you've got to become part of the family, join in the arguments, what works well, what doesn't work well. And I think that comes out of the
Oh my goodness. Well, Robin, Myrtle, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And Leanne, thank you for telling it. Myrtle, it was so wonderful learning about you and then getting to talk with you today. This was such a pleasure. I didn't know that you were going to be here. So this was such an exciting surprise today. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of our shorts filmmakers, our narrative shorts filmmakers, our documentary shorts filmmakers. The Woods Hole Film Festival is live now, and it's all virtual. So you can watch films from the festival anywhere around. You can watch them all. And it's so exciting. It's going through August 1st, so next Saturday. So please, everyone, thank you to our crew from High Card, from My Other Suit is Human, from Therapy, from Name Crew Tiny Toons, from Myrtle Simpson, A Life on Ice, and Play Along. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy opening day of the festival, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for asking us.